The morning it started, I was standing by the break room window, waiting for the coffee to finish dripping. Same chipped mug I'd used for years. The heater was clicking too loud, and someone had left a conference call open in the next room, all muffled voices and keyboard taps. That's when he said it. "You're off the project until you apologize to my son." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sentence landed flat, like it had already been rehearsed. We were on a company-wide call, cameras on, more faces than I bothered to count. I nodded once, the way you do when you're acknowledging instructions, not agreeing with them. I muted myself, let the coffee finish, took a sip. It tasted burnt, like always. What stuck with me wasn't the line itself. It was the way his son, Evan, didn't look surprised. He just leaned back in his chair and adjusted his headset, already acting like the room belonged to him. There was a document open on my second monitor at the time, something I hadn't touched in years. I remember glancing at the file name before the call ended. Then I closed it and went back to listening. I'd been with the company a long time, long enough that people stopped asking what I did and just assumed things worked because they always had. My days were quiet, logs reviewed before anyone noticed a problem, small fixes made early so nothing ever escalated, the kind of work that doesn't get applause but keeps everyone sleeping at night. Evan arrived 6 weeks earlier. Fresh title, new slide decks. He liked to say things like legacy friction and streamlining ownership. He said them with a smile, like he was doing us all a favor. During meetings, he talked fast and clicked through charts he hadn't built, explaining systems I'd designed back when the company still fit on one floor. I didn't interrupt him. I wrote notes. That was my habit. The office had changed over the years. Brighter lights, standing desks no one used, a kombucha tap that hissed like it was offended. But some things stayed the same. The hum of the servers down the hall, the soft buzz of Slack messages coming in faster than anyone could read them, the feeling that if something broke, it would quietly become my problem. That morning, after the call, I walked back to my desk. A few people avoided eye contact. One analyst gave me a quick look, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Evan was already laughing with someone near the glass offices, confidence untouched. I sat down and opened my email. There was a calendar invite I hadn't noticed before. A one-on-one Evan had declined. Then another. Then a short message from him, sent late the night before. Just a line and move forward. No greeting, no signature. I closed the email and stared at the wall for a moment. The hum from the vents filled the space. I could hear someone stirring sugar into a cup nearby. I felt calm, not numb, just steady. Before lunch, I logged out of the front system and into another one. Not the new interface Evan liked to demo. The older console. The one that still used plain text and didn't care about appearances. It accepted my credentials without hesitation. I didn't change anything yet. I just looked. Then I leaned back, folded my hands, and waited. The coffee had gone cold by then, but I didn't bother reheating it. I worked out of the Chicago office back when it still mattered where you sat. We used to joke that you could tell how serious a system was by how ugly the interface looked. The prettier it got, the more likely something important was being hidden underneath. I came in during the acquisition years, when contracts were written fast, and half the leadership assumed optimism counted as strategy. Back then, I wasn't called a legacy resource. I was a consultant, brought in to make things hold together while the company figured out what it wanted to become. Most days followed a rhythm: elevator ride, badge scan that beeped a half-second late, desk chair that never quite locked. I liked arriving early, before the floor filled up. The building sounded different then. No meetings, no posturing, just systems doing what they were supposed to do. Evan disrupted that rhythm without meaning to. He liked visibility, loved status updates. If something didn't show up on his dashboard, it didn't exist to him. He reorganized workflows by color-coding them. Redundant checks I'd added after a regulatory scare years earlier were labeled overhead. He didn't ask why they were there. I tried once to walk him through a risk history, booked a meeting, brought notes. He skimmed the first page, smiled, and said, "We'll circle back." We didn't. It wasn't personal. That's what people get wrong. He wasn't angry with me, he just didn't see me. To him, I was part of the background noise, someone who had always been there and therefore didn't need to be understood. The first real change happened quietly. A tool went offline for cleanup. Then a cross-check stopped running at night. Nothing broke right away. That's the danger with systems like ours. The damage shows up later, somewhere else, in a report no one reads until it's too late. I documented everything: dates, access changes, screenshots. Not because I planned to use them, but because that's how I'd always worked. Good records keep emotions out of decisions. The call with his father came the following week. Full staff, no warning. I listened to the accusation without reacting. Creating friction. Holding back innovation. Words that sound serious but don't mean much when you examine them. When I said okay, I wasn't conceding. I was acknowledging that the rules had changed. After the call, I didn't storm out. I finished the day, closed tickets, answered 2 emails, helped an intern fix a permissions error that had nothing to do with any of this. Then, after most people had left, I opened a folder I hadn't accessed since before the last rebrand. It sat on an encrypted drive, nested behind directories no one bothered to click anymore. Inside were contracts, drafts, old diagrams. My handwriting scanned into PDFs from a time when signatures still mattered. I read slowly. No rush, just confirmation. The clause was still there, unchanged, untouched. I closed the folder without taking notes, shut down my workstation the normal way. On the way out, the security guard nodded at me like he always did. I nodded back. Outside, the air smelled like rain and hot pavement. I stood there for a moment, keys in my hand, listening to traffic move like it didn't care about titles or org charts. That night, at home, I set my laptop on the kitchen table, opened a blank document, typed a single line at the top. Sequence. Then I stopped typing. I put the laptop to sleep and went to bed, letting the house settle around me. There was no urgency yet, just clarity. I didn't rush the next step. I've learned that urgency makes mistakes louder. Instead, I spent the next few days doing what I'd always done, watching patterns. From the outside, nothing looked different. Evan ran stand-ups like a morning show. Slides got cleaner. Status emails got shorter. People said alignment a lot. Underneath, small things began to drift. A nightly reconciliation finished faster than it should have. A validation check returned fewer warnings, not because issues were fixed, but because the check itself was gone. I kept notes in a simple text file, timestamps, system names, no commentary, just facts. On Thursday afternoon, Evan pushed a memo announcing the sunset of another internal tool. One I'd built years earlier after a near miss that never made it past legal. His reason was neat and harmless. Dashboard clarity. I requested a one-on-one. He declined. Twice. The third time, he replied on Slack. Just trim what's unnecessary and stay solution-focused. No greeting, no punctuation at the end. That evening, I logged into the older console again. The real one. It didn't care about titles. It only recognized keys. Mine still worked. They always had. I didn't disable anything yet. I verified ownership, cross-referenced contract IDs, checked renewal dates. One license in particular caught my eye. Still active, still billed, still tied to my consulting entity from before the acquisition. I sat back and thought in steps, not emotionally, structurally. Step 1 was documentation. I forwarded a quiet risk note through an internal compliance channel I'd helped design years earlier. No names, no accusations, just a description of exposure created by recent deletions. Step 2 was containment. I adjusted expiration settings on a few non-critical sync keys. Nothing dramatic. Grace periods intact. No alerts triggered. Step 3 was patience. The response came faster than I expected. The next morning, I was invited, publicly, into another all-hands call. Cameras on again, same faces, different energy. I listened as his father spoke about momentum and respecting leadership. I was asked to apologize, not privately, publicly. I unmuted, said, "Understood." Then I logged off. No speech, no explanation. I let the silence do the work. Silence has weight when you don't try to fill it. That afternoon, I printed my resignation letter, left the date blank, folded it once, and set it aside. Then I opened a second file, a checklist I hadn't touched in a long time. It wasn't a to-do list. It was a map. Every system I'd architected independently, every vendor relationship that still pointed back to my original firm, every place where ownership wasn't as simple as the org chart suggested. One by one, I reviewed them. Not to pull anything yet, just to understand the shape of what existed. Late that night, I reached under my desk and unplugged a small thumb drive from a dummy port. It had been there for years, collecting dust. Inside were encrypted logs, offline, untouched. I held it for a moment, then set it next to the printed letter. I wasn't angry, I wasn't excited, I was precise. Before going to bed, I sent one final internal note through the secure channel. Short, factual, documented. Then I shut the laptop and placed my phone face down on the table, and I waited. The first signal came early Monday, just after sunrise. I wasn't in the office. I was at my kitchen table, light coming through the blinds, the sound of a neighbor's garage door opening and closing down the block. An automated notification hit my inbox. Not an alert, just a status update. A sync handshake had expired overnight, cleanly. No errors, no warnings. Exactly as scheduled. I didn't touch the keyboard right away. I poured coffee, stirred it slowly, and sat back down. By 9, the internal investor portal was timing out. Not down, just hesitant. The kind of issue people blame on network traffic or a forgotten token refresh. Evan would have shrugged it off. Probably already had. At 10, a second system stopped populating live views. Blank tiles where charts usually loaded. No red banners, no alarms, just empty space. That's the thing about controlled changes. They don't announce themselves. They wait to be noticed. I checked my phone once. A Slack message from someone in finance, sent and unsent. Then nothing. Around noon, I logged into my admin console again. The older one. I verified that the expiration cascades were holding. One system every 12 hours. Enough to look like coincidence. Not enough to trigger incident protocol. Step 1 had already been done. Documentation was in place. Step 2 was separation. I revoked nothing outright. I let licenses lapse naturally, the way contracts do when no one renews them. Step 3 was exit. I printed the resignation letter again, signed it this time, and clipped my badge to the top. Walked into HR mid-afternoon. The receptionist smiled and asked if I was transferring departments. I nodded, said, "Appreciate your time," and slid the envelope across the desk. She didn't open it before I left. Outside, it had started to drizzle. Not enough to soak anything, just enough to change the air. I stood under the awning for a moment, then walked to my car. Back at home, I shut my laptop and didn't turn it back on. I let the systems do what they were designed to do. The next morning, the calls started. Not to me, around me. A procurement flag, a license conflict, a vendor name that hadn't appeared in years suddenly showing up as owner. Ridgeway Systems LLC, my old firm, still active, still valid. By mid-morning, legal was involved. By late morning, executives were pacing. I didn't know all of that yet. I only knew my phone was quiet. At 11:07 a.m., an email came through. Not from Evan, not from his father, from the CEO's assistant, someone I'd worked alongside quietly for years. Subject line, "Today." Body, "Would you be open to a conversation? No agenda." I read it once, didn't reply. I closed the email, set the phone face down, and watched the steam rise from my mug until it disappeared. Then I waited. The call came in just after lunch. Not a number I recognized. New York area code. I let it ring out. A minute later, an email followed. Legal. Short subject line. Clarification. I didn't respond right away. By then, I already knew what the problem was. When systems fail loudly, people panic. When they fail quietly, lawyers get curious. Someone had finally opened the contracts instead of skimming the summaries. An hour later, I agreed to a call. Audio only. No cameras. That was important to me. There were 4 people on the line: legal counsel, someone from finance, a senior operations lead I'd worked with years earlier, and Evan's father. He spoke last. The tone was different now, slower, careful. They asked about access, about licensing, about why certain dashboards were no longer populating investor packets. I answered in plain sentences, no history lessons, no commentary, just how the systems were structured and who owned what. At one point, legal interrupted. She read from a document, clause language, dates, renewal terms. Her voice flattened when she reached the end. So to be clear, she said, these tools are not company-owned assets. They never were, I said. They were licensed. Silence followed, the kind that tells you everyone is doing math in their head. Evan's father tried to reframe it, talked about intent, about misunderstanding, about how this could have been handled differently. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. I stated one fact. I was removed publicly, without cause or review. No emotion, just record. That ended the debate. Not because I'd won anything, but because the rules were suddenly visible. Legal outlined options, temporary access, a consulting retainer, a review period, everything conditional, everything documented. I listened, took notes, asked for all proposals in writing. Before the call ended, someone asked if I would consider coming back on site. I said no. There was another pause, shorter this time. We ended the call politely. No raised voices, no threats, just clarity. Afterward, I sat at the table for a while, hands folded, listening to the refrigerator hum. I didn't feel relief. I felt order returning. Later that evening, a formal agreement arrived in my inbox. Ridgeway Systems reinstated as an active vendor. Advisory scope, limited access, numbers that spoke for themselves. I didn't sign it that night. I closed the document, shut the laptop, and went for a walk around the block. The sky was clear. The sidewalks were damp from earlier rain. Somewhere, a dog barked once and stopped. When I came back, the house was quiet. I left the agreement unread on the screen and went to bed. Some decisions don't need to be rushed. By the end of the week, the story had settled into paperwork. No announcements. No apologies sent company-wide. Just documents moving through channels they should have used years ago. Legal reviewed timelines. Finance rebuilt projections with placeholders instead of live feeds. Operations ran audits by hand, slowly, carefully, the way you do when you realize automation isn't magic, it's trust written in code. I signed the agreement on Friday morning, advisory only, clear boundaries, fixed scope. My access was restored in layers, each one documented, each one logged. No shortcuts, no assumptions. I didn't go back to the building. From my kitchen table, I watched the systems stabilize, not improve, just stabilize. The missing audit trail was acknowledged in writing. A disclosure plan drafted, regulators notified before they had to ask. The consequences weren't dramatic. They were procedural, missed opportunities, delayed calls, a quiet downgrade in confidence that would take time to repair. Evan was reassigned, not fired. Titles rarely disappear. They just get smaller rooms. His new role didn't include platform access. That wasn't personal. It was necessary. One afternoon, a junior analyst emailed me. She thanked me for the documentation templates, said they were helping her understand how things fit together. I replied with 2 sentences and attached a checklist. That was enough. The last unresolved item was the archive. The encrypted logs only I could open. Legal requested access. I granted it under supervision, screen shared, recorded, with custody terms clearly defined. We reviewed everything together. Dates matched, warnings aligned, nothing hidden, nothing embellished. When it was done, I closed the archive and generated a final hash, sent it to legal, then deleted my local copy. Clean ending, no leverage left dangling. That night, I cleared my desk at home. Old notebooks, outdated badges, a thumb drive I no longer needed. I put them into a box and slid it into the closet. The systems would run without me now. Slower, maybe, more cautious, but correct. That was the point. I made dinner. Simple. Washed the pan, dried it, and put it away. Then I sat down with a cup of tea and let the week end. The house felt different once everything stopped buzzing. No alerts, no late-night pings, no quiet pressure humming in the background, pretending to be important. Just normal sounds again. The dishwasher finishing its cycle, wind moving through the trees outside, a floorboard creaking when I crossed the room. Saturday morning, I cleaned the kitchen slowly. Not because it needed it, but because routine has a way of resetting things. I wiped the counters, rinsed the mug I'd been using all week, and put it back in the cabinet instead of leaving it by the sink like I usually did. After that, I organized a single drawer in my desk. Old adapters, pens that barely worked, a folded note from a conference years ago with a phone number I never called. I threw most of it away. The work was done, properly done. Not with speeches or final meetings, but with boundaries and records and clear endings. That's how things last. A few days later, an email came in from someone at another firm. Different industry, similar problem, an older system. A quiet person being pushed aside because they didn't talk loud enough in meetings. I read it, closed it, and didn't answer right away. Not everything needs an immediate response. I went for a walk instead. Same route around the neighborhood. Same cracked sidewalk near the corner. Nothing dramatic. Just movement forward. What stayed with me wasn't the conflict. It was the reminder. That silence isn't absence. That experience doesn't announce itself. And that some people only understand value when it's no longer doing free labor in the background. Back home, I put the kettle on and sat at the table while it heated. The chair felt solid. The room felt settled. I liked that. I opened my laptop one last time that evening. Not for work, just to close a few tabs I'd left open out of habit. Then I shut it down fully and slid it into the drawer. That chapter was finished. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If it felt familiar, you're not alone. These situations are quieter than people expect, and they happen more often than anyone admits. If you'd like, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think. And if you're comfortable, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read more of those than you'd expect. 2 more stories will be up next. Different places, different people, similar moments where calm turned out to be the most powerful choice available. I'll see you there.